The dust was the first thing he noticed. Not the sterile, filtered dust of the Kael habitat domes, but a fine, iron-rich grit that clung to everything, a silent testament to a world that had once been alive. Vex, a junior scholar of the Kael, stood at the threshold of the excavation, his four-fingered hands trembling slightly. Before him lay the entrance to a human city, buried for millennia beneath the Martian regolith. The airlock door, a thing of curved, alloyed metal, was sealed, its surface pitted with micrometeorite strikes. Vex's mentor, Talon, regarded the structure with the same disdain a master might show a flawed tool. Primitive, Talon's voice crackled through their comms, a series of sharp clicks and whistles. Look at their crude attempts at pressurization. No wonder they failed. Vex, however, was drawn to the imperfections. The door wasn't just sealed, it was reinforced. The alloy wasn't just metal, it was a composite, layered with ceramics and polymers. It spoke not of failure, but of an obsessive, desperate need to hold back the void. He ran a clawed hand along the surface, feeling the subtle, uneven texture, a map of 1,000 tiny, human decisions. The city within was a labyrinth of contradictions. The Kael expedition had been mapping the ruins for cycles, cataloging human artifacts with cold, analytical precision. They found evidence of grand, centralized power structures, of planned communities laid out in perfect grids. But they also found chaos. Streets that dead-ended inexplicably. Buildings that seemed to grow organically around one another, their foundations built over older, demolished structures. Vex found a chamber filled with the shattered remains of what Talon identified as data storage devices. A failed archive, Talon declared, kicking a fractured crystal shard. Their record-keeping was as chaotic as their architecture. Vex, however, knelt among the shards. He noticed they weren't random. The fractures were clean, precise. Many of the pieces, when fitted together, formed new, unintended patterns. It was as if the humans had shattered their own knowledge, not through neglect, but to create something new from the pieces. A discarded memory became a foundation for a new thought. It was a concept the Kael, with their rigid caste system and unbroken lineages, found utterly alien. The discovery came in what the Kael designated Sector Gamma 7, a residential district. Talon was directing the excavation of a large, subterranean water reservoir when Vex's scanner picked up an anomaly. Buried beneath the silt was not a pipe or a conduit, but a lattice of what appeared to be roots. Biologically inert now, fossilized, but the structure was unmistakable. Agriculture. Talon scoffed. In a sealed city? They were fools, trying to defy the natural order. Vex disagreed. The roots weren't just growing. They were woven into the city's infrastructure. They reinforced the reservoir walls, their filaments acting as natural filters, pulling trace minerals from the water. They provided thermal insulation, their complex networks regulating the temperature of the surrounding soil. It wasn't defiance, it was integration. The humans hadn't tried to build a city separate from life. They had built a city with it, using biology as a tool. The Kael saw separation, hierarchy, control. Vex saw a partnership, a messy, symbiotic relationship with the world they inhabited. The tension between Vex and Talon escalated when they uncovered what the Kael called the Great Archive. It was a vast chamber, its walls lined with crystalline data storage units, each one a perfect, hexagonal prism. Talon was ecstatic. Order. At last, a testament to their capacity for structure. He ordered the units to be carefully extracted and cataloged. But as the first prism was lifted, Vex noticed something. The base of the unit wasn't uniform. It was covered in microscopic, spiral grooves. He used a microimager to zoom in, and his blood chilled. The grooves were a script, a language, but it wasn't carved onto the surface. It was grown, a pattern of crystalline growth that was part of the unit's very formation. It was a mistake, an impurity in the manufacturing process that the humans had not discarded but had encoded into their data. Talon saw a flaw. Vex saw a signature. He realized the humans didn't erase their errors, they preserved them. They learned from their mistakes, and in doing so, made their knowledge stronger, more resilient. Their archives weren't just records of what they knew, but a map of how they had come to know it. The Kael's rigid caste system was their greatest strength and their most profound weakness. Each caste had a specific function, a role ordained at birth. The architects designed. The engineers built. The scholars interpreted. There was no room for overlap, no allowance for a scholar to suggest a design improvement or an engineer to question a scholarly interpretation. This rigidity was shattered when a junior engineer, tasked with stabilizing a tunnel wall adjacent to the archive, made a critical error. The support struts he installed, based on a standard Kael design pattern, began to resonate with a low-frequency hum emanating from the archive itself. The vibration threatened to collapse the entire sector. Talon's solution was immediate and brutal. Seal the sector. Abandon the archive. Preserve the order at all costs. Vex, however, saw the error not as a failure, but as an interaction. He realized the hum wasn't destructive, it was a key. He convinced the junior engineer, against Talon's furious orders, to alter the strut's frequency, not to block the hum, but to amplify it. It was a reckless, unorthodox act, born not of protocol, but of intuition. As the engineer adjusted the struts, a miracle occurred. The hum grew louder, and the walls of the great archive began to glow. The crystalline prisms, inert for eons, flared with internal light. Lines of data, previously invisible, traced across the chamber floor, projecting a three-dimensional star map. But it wasn't just a map of stars. It was a map of journeys. The lines showed the paths of human ships, not as straight, efficient vectors, but as sprawling, chaotic trajectories. They showed ships that had been lost, that had taken detours, that had stumbled upon new systems by accident. The map was a testament to a civilization that didn't just plan its voyages, but learned from its wrong turns. The Kael stared in stunned silence. Their own star charts were perfect, elegant lines of conquest and control. The humans' map was a beautiful, tangled mess of discovery. Vex looked at Talon, whose rigid face was for the first time showing something other than disdain. It was confusion. The Kael had come to Mars to study the ruins of a failed species. They had instead found the ruins of a species that had succeeded precisely because it was allowed to fail. In the end, the Kael did not leave Mars. They stayed. Not to conquer, not to catalog, but to learn. The rigid caste system began to show the first cracks of change. An architect was seen consulting with a biologist. An engineer was observed sketching designs based on the fossilized root systems. Vex became the bridge between the two worlds. He explained the human philosophy not as a set of rules, but as a process. It was the courage to be wrong, the wisdom to see a mistake not as an endpoint, but as a starting point. The Kael, who had built their entire civilization on the foundation of being right, were now faced with the terrifying, exhilarating prospect of being wrong. And in the quiet, dusty ruins of a human city buried deep beneath the red soil of Mars, they began to understand that the greatest strength was not in the unbroken path, but in the unmade one. The future, they realized, was not a destination to be reached, but a path to be forged, stumble by stumble, in the beautiful, messy, unyielding light of mistakes.